Calls it a strike to count on Taylor. Urías fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matthew Moreno. A little early, so apologies to those who might be catching this late. We are doing a 4 o'clock version of this show instead of a 9 o'clock version this week. But Matt, we always start with the weekly recap. I'm going to get to that. 3.5 games back of the Diamondbacks. The Dodgers lose 2 of 3 in Philadelphia after 2 of 3 against the Reds as well. How are you feeling on a Sunday afternoon after what was not a really enjoyable week of Dodgers baseball?
I think the one saving grace is that it was an early game and we're getting this done, like you said, at 4 o'clock. Apologies to those of you who, like Jeff said, are used to the later show. And thank you for many of the familiar names that are still here live with us.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, just, at least it'll be an early night and then, an off day tomorrow and then right back to it with a homestand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, thank you to those listening to the podcast as well. You can check out the podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get that. YouTube, if you're new here, we appreciate you joining us. Please subscribe, ring the notification bell so you can be a part of the community as well. We're going to get to the starting rotation, which includes a Julio Urías health update, not a good one. A Tony Gonslin, some weird quotes from Dave Roberts today about Gonslin's health. We'll get to Bobby Miller, which is maybe the lone positive thing that we'll be talking about today. We are going to talk Dodgers bullpen, so if you need to plug your ears for a little bit of time, we will discuss that, as well as the Diamondbacks, the team that is coming up on the heels of the Dodgers. But, Matt, I'm just curious. We've been a roller coaster of an experience as fans of the Dodgers this season. You and I were on here about a month and a half ago, and I said, hey, hot take, the Dodgers will be fine. That take aged pretty well for 4 or 5 weeks as the Dodgers went on a run. They had the best record in the National League, one of the best teams in baseball. Well, the last week or so, I see the panic starting to come again. Where are you at with this team? Like, has the last week given you cause for concern, or are there enough buts out there that you think you can kind of explain away and say, hey, this team's going to be fine?
Oh, man, it's so tough. I think they're not as bad as they've played. This, especially on this road trip, the 2-4 record, 3 walk-off losses. And I mean, like Freddie Freeman said, as much as, you might want to gripe on the walk-off losses, he did say the other side of the coin is we were in all 3 of those games and could have easily won them. And he wasn't saying that to make an excuse. He just said, obviously we didn't, but, fact, they're not necessarily getting blown out, which, is encouraging. But, I think there is reason for concern because the injuries and, Julio, his hamstring issue was supposed to be, the minimum day. And I know we've heard this from the Dodgers in the past, so we all probably took it with a grain of salt, but there was very little concern. And then he seemed to have cleared the hurdle once he, got up to facing hitters in a simulated game. He was supposed to come back, and then all of a sudden, actually, oh no, he's still dealing with some soreness in there. And so my concern comes from, are the Dodgers ever going to get healthy enough? Now, I'm not fully convinced that they're maybe as good as they might have been playing when they went on that big tear, because I thought there were still some issues that were being masked by, big offensive performances and Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts, being otherworldly for a stretch. But I don't think they're, 2-4 bad. My biggest question, like I said, is just, are they going to get healthy enough, maybe add enough new pieces at the trade deadline to really kind of find their footing?
Yeah, I'm looking through the comments. Laura says, cause for concern. Say it. Michael says, yes, they're as bad as they've played. Matt EB says, losses are expected with 3 starting pitchers currently hurt. I tend to think like when they go through a stretch like this, what's the problem? And right now it's very easy to point to the problem, especially the stretch we just saw. It's the bullpen. Name a pitcher in the Dodgers bullpen, and chances are they gave up a run at some point in the last 5 or 6 days. Even the 2 guys that I would say you could most trust in Evan Phillips and Caleb Ferguson. Ferguson had a pair of bad outings. Evan Phillips had a bad outing. Even Shelby Miller, the guy that everyone seems to love right now, like he gave up the walk-off hit after Caleb Ferguson was pulled in that one. And so those guys, the bullpen to me is the easy one. If the bullpen wasn't terrible, and we're going to get to them, they've been terrible, then all of a sudden this is a much different road trip. It's probably a 4-2 road trip and we're not freaking out. So then the question is, well, how easy is it to fix the bullpen? And I would say of all the situations, all the position groups, that's the easiest. Because you've got a bunch of guys hurt who you're hoping to get back at some point, whether it's Daniel Hudson, who we'll give an update on later in the show, whether it's Alex Reyes, who we expect back at some point, Fire Eyes and Trinan, you name it. They've got some powerful arms due back eventually. Not to mention, again, we're going to get to it. I hate to keep saying that, but when it comes to the bullpen, I do think there's a little bit of bad luck involved when you look at some of the underlying metrics, batting average on balls in play, home runs per fly ball, that type of thing. And so the offense has been very good, one of the best in baseball. They will continue to be one of the best in baseball. I'm not worried about that. The starting pitching, Kershaw was really good this week. Bobby Miller was really good this week. Tony Gonslin has been fine this season. And then there's guys that you're expecting back at some point. Michael Grove, what do you think? I think he's a number 5 starter. He's an upgrade over Syndergaard, in my opinion. So that's one positive there. And then you just hope to get some guys positive. They've got a number of prospects. So all that's to say is I'm genuinely not concerned about this group. They're still the 3rd best team in the National League. They are still scoring more runs than anyone. To me, it's just a question of, can they fix the bullpen and can they get healthy in the rotation? And I think the answer to both of those questions, Matt, for me at least, are yes. So I'll ask you those individually. Do you think they can fix the bullpen first?
I think they can, just because I still do believe in majority of the relief pitchers they have who are struggling. And it's like you said, it was ugly on the road trip, and there are a couple, maybe pitches here and there from not being in this situation. Again, at what point, and I alluded to it when we did, I don't know if it was our last, kind of the emergency live show after the walk-off loss earlier in the week, or last Sunday when we did it. But at what point does it become, well, actually, the bullpen is who the bullpen is. They're not some of these guys aren't necessarily going to get back to what we maybe expected them to be based off prior performance from either last season and or the year before. So, do I think Ferguson is going to continue to give up, walk-off home runs? No, I think he's better than that. And I don't know if that's, a hot take. I think on Twitter this morning it was. Alex Vesia, I think he, is starting to sort of find his footing a little bit after a rough, sort of restart when he got recalled. Yency Almonte had, I think I'm pretty sure he pitched in the bullpen game against the Phillies, and he looked okay. So I'm a little bit more confident in the bullpen getting sorted out than maybe the health in the starting rotation holding up. And sorry, not to completely jump ahead and answer your second question.
Yeah. Real quick, let me just make this note on the bullpen, because someone in the comments just made it, and it has just been reported today, is that Alex Reyes, who I mentioned, is actually not going to pitch this year. Had another shoulder surgery, will not pitch in 2023. So Bill Plunkett, Fabian Ardaya, among others, mentioning that, but Ardaya tweeted it out about 6 hours ago. So I had not seen that. So there's one correction to something I said. Of the guys that you were hoping to get back, there's at least one of those names you can cross off the list. So starting rotate. So bullpen, you have some degree of confidence that they'll be able to figure it out. Now I cut you off as you were about to answer the question of, can they fix the rotation?
Yeah, real quick on the bullpen, that at least for me, Alex Reyes was a lottery ticket. Like, he honestly wasn't, even before his second shoulder surgery, he wasn't somebody that I was necessarily pointing to and saying, hey, like, once Alex Reyes is able to pitch, then the bullpen's really going to take off. Frankly, it hinges on Daniel Hudson, who could be, maybe a couple weeks away at this point. He is doing a rehab assignment, but there are some checkpoints he's going to have to get through. And, Blake Trinan, we really haven't heard much about him. We're looking at like August, September type thing again. And at that point, it'll kind of be like last year where, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But all of that being said, I think the bullpen, I'm a little bit more confident there. With the rotation, Clayton Kershaw stayed healthy to this point, which is great, but I don't know, like, can you fully count on that for the rest of the season? Back injuries can be tricky. Bobby Miller, he's been amazing. There's going to be some regression at some point, right? I would expect, and if there isn't, then, I'll sit here and say I was wrong, and absolute all credit to Bobby Miller for just being lights out in his rookie year. I do agree with you that Gavin Stone is, an upgrade, if you will, over Noah Syndergaard.
Sorry, Michael Grove, not Gavin Stone. Gavin Stone has been the opposite of an upgrade. Unfortunately, not to say he won't be, but we'll get into him. He hasn't been good at AAA either.
My apologies there. Yeah, Michael Grove is an upgrade over Noah Syndergaard. Like I mentioned earlier, Julio and his hamstring issue, like that's, I think, if he comes back now in 2 weeks-ish time, then great, but he is going to need a rehab assignment, so we're going to have to see how that goes.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the rotation. That's what I had first on the topics for today. The state of the rotation. I would put 2 guys in the we feel good about them category. There were 3 before today, Matt. We'll get into why the third one is no longer. But I would put Clayton Kershaw and Bobby Miller in this category. Kershaw had a rough May, has made 2 starts since, and has been very good. So I think we can go back to feeling really good about Clayton Kershaw, potential all-star. Bobby Miller, Dave Roberts, just a quote, we certainly bet on the talent, but he's performed better than he did in the minor leagues. It kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. 16 straight scoreless innings, I believe, is his current stretch. A couple of facts that people you've probably seen on social media. He's the second pitcher for the Dodgers since 1901 to go 5 innings and allow 1 or fewer runs in each of his first 4 starts. The first was Kenta Maeda, fun fact there, 2016. He's also the 9th pitcher since 1901 to allow 2 runs or fewer through his first 4 starts. The only Dodger to achieve that being Fernando Valenzuela and again, Kenta Maeda in 2016. So remarkable stuff from Kershaw and from Bobby Miller. I think we're on the same page with Bobby Miller. Obviously, he cannot be 2 earned runs in 4 starts or whatever he's at currently. He's been remarkable. And yet, when he come with the pedigree and the velocity and the stuff that Bobby Miller has, there is an air of some degree of sustainability. And I've joked about this, Matt. Blake Williams texted us after like his second start and was like, hey, Bobby Miller, rookie of the year. And I looked it up. I'm like 30-1 for Bobby Miller. Come on. Matt, he's still 30-1. This makes no sense to me. I know how good Corbin Carroll has been. Okay. But like, there's not really anybody besides Corbin Carroll in the National League. There's still 100 games to go. He could have a James Outman-like regression. He could get hurt. There's lots of things. Bobby Miller has the hype as a top 25 prospect that came up. He's throwing 100 miles an hour. He's doing it on the biggest stages against the best teams. If he does this for the Dodgers, I'm just saying that 30-1 feels like value to me.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm surprised that they haven't moved since earlier on, especially, when he does what he does against a team like the Yankees on Sunday Night Baseball. Like, you would think that would have, maybe opened some eyes. And I think, what that rookie of the year race could come down to is if the Dodgers or Diamondbacks whoever wins the division, I think will end up having the rookie of the year, assuming, Bobby Miller continues to pitch well, even if there is a little bit of regression, but he still performs at a high level. But yeah, I mean, I really can't say enough about him. I think again, the Dodgers have tried to find, soft landing spots for their rookie pitchers. Wasn't the case for Gavin Stone, wasn't the case for Bobby Miller. Gavin Stone, sort of took his lumps, but Bobby Miller has really capitalized on the opportunities and basically replaced it, because Gavin Stone was supposed to be who was going to take over for Dustin May because of his injury, and he continued to struggle. And Bobby Miller has just put together one impressive performance after another. And I think the other thing that's important to recognize too is he's not doing it over like maybe 4 innings each time, right? Like he is, especially against the Phillies, like he gave them 6 innings, which they absolutely needed heading into a bullpen game that, unfortunately didn't end up panning out.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that we're going to talk about, a couple Dodgers prospects that just got promoted from AA to AAA. And I know we've had people that have said, hey, just bring these guys up. I think Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone are evidence and proof of just how complicated it can be with young pitchers, because Gavin Stone was the guy who was closer to the major leagues. He was more developed. He was more major league ready. They were both top 100 prospects, but Gavin Stone was believed to be the guy who was more ready. He comes up and has like a 12.5 ERA or whatever it was in a pair of starts. And by the way, he got sent back down to AAA since being sent down 2 starts, 4 1/3 in each, combined 8.2. In those 8 2/3, 9 earned runs, 15 hits, 7 walks, and 9 strikeouts. So a whip of almost 3 and ERA over 9. So it just goes to show that sometimes it doesn't make sense, because then you have Bobby Miller, who's putting up better numbers against the Braves and the Yankees and the Nationals, and who, fill in the blank, than he was against AA and AAA players. And so it just goes to show you that some of the pitching prospects, and Dave Roberts has kind of hinted at it, like when the stage gets bigger, something happens and you can't really guess how guys are going to react. Are they going to rise to the moment? Are they going to make the moment too big for themselves? But Bobby Miller's even said, like, hey, the adrenaline gets going. I hear the crowd, and it somehow makes him better. I'm not saying Gavin Stone's never going to pan out. I think the Miller thing, and Roberts, again, has hinted at it. It just goes to show you how complicated it can be with starting pitchers. And, as people say, it's not necessarily linear development for these guys. Sometimes it's just a huge jump. Sometimes it's a pitfall. I do want to move on, though, in the starting pitching. I mentioned that there was a third guy in the good category prior to today, and that would have been Tony Gonslin, who, for whatever you think about him, has been pretty good. But then Dave Roberts had some weird quotes. Bill Plunkett of the OC Register, I believe, he tweeted this out. He asked Dave Roberts why they chose a bullpen game Sunday over Gonslin on regular rest. He said, quote, I think with Tony, the recovery hasn't been great. So trying to appreciate the short and the long term, making sure we take care of him and his health, making sure the recovery is where it needs to be. We just felt it was best for him. You hear that and you're like, wait, pause. What? He hasn't been great. So thankfully, a follow-up question, anything specific? Quote, no. He's never been a great in-between start guy, but I still believe, in talking to our pitching guys, the recovery is just not where it has been. There's no smoke. It's just seeing that. Then it's what can we do to make sure he has great outings when he does pitch? There's nothing specific. It's just overall body recovery. It just seems like at times with him, you're seeing 95s and then you're seeing 90 to 92. I don't know if it's a pacing intentionally. I don't know if it's recovery part of it or there's a slow getting loose. But the main thing is we have to make sure we keep him strong and keep him healthy. Somebody in the comments earlier called that word salad. That's a great description. Matt, what the heck do you make of this quote? Dave Roberts saying with Tony Gonslin, his recovery in between starts has not been great. A guy that, as we've alluded to, has some injury history himself.
It's concerning because Dave Roberts and the Dodgers in general don't offer up information like this if there isn't necessarily something there. And frankly, we've joked about it. Even when there is, a clear injury, it's, oh, no, he's actually fine. He's day to day. And then, 3 days later, oh, he's on the 15-day IL and it's actually XYZ. I think it's pretty telling. The Dodgers in general have long preferred to give their starters an extra day of rest whenever possible. It's just their philosophy. It's what they stand by. And so, that's why we saw the bullpen game against the Phillies. And I think, not to completely derail it, but, it is also a little telling on, the state of Gavin Stone, because they easily could have recalled him for another spot start and they chose not to. Like, they willingly chose a bullpen game knowing their relief pitchers have not been great recently, instead of going to Gavin Stone, instead of going to Tony Gonsolin on what would have been regular rest, not even short rest, because obviously nobody's expecting any pitcher in the regular season to go on short rest.
Yeah.
But yeah, it says, to answer the question specifically, it's concerning. And it's honestly the first time I've heard Dave Roberts, that I can remember at least, sort of express this sentiment about Gonsolin publicly.
Yeah.
And so, I worry that, is there something there? Is it with the elbow or the forearm, whatever he sort of had issues with? Is his shoulder acting up?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's concerning. And again, a lot of things can go wrong. A lot of things have already gone wrong. And so it's almost like just the anticipation of, okay, is Tony Gonsolin now the next domino to fall?
Yeah, it feels like we're all just waiting for the shoe to drop and say, well, surely some more bad news is coming as soon as you hear something like this. It's a weird quote, and maybe it means nothing. Maybe it's just one of those moments where he gets asked a question, he said something, he's like, that kind of came out wrong, but doesn't really clarify it. So we'll see. I mean, it could just be what he's saying. Like, hey, he's just a guy that in between starts, like, he doesn't bounce back as quickly. And so, we're just going to keep letting him stay on the routine that he's on and not messing with it. And it could be nothing, or it could be, the shoulder's been bugging him. It's like the Dustin May thing. It's like, oh yeah, he had pain for the last 6 months ever since he started rehabbing, and we didn't tell anybody. And now he's out for a while. So we'll see. Something to monitor, I would say, at the very least. One other question I did want to ask you real quick. And it was related to the Michael Grove start and the decision to use an opener. If you watch his show, Michael Grove is a friend of the show, so I'm very biased towards Michael Grove and wanting him to succeed. He had a great start. Well, let me rephrase that. He looked as good as he has looked against the Yankees. He ended up giving 4 runs up in that game. It was 4 hits, 4 runs, 2 homers to Jake Bauers. The stuff ticked up. I thought it was just sort of bad sequencing that he gives up 4 base runners and all 4 of them end up scoring because the home runs come right after him. For him to come off of that and the Dodgers' decision to use an opener, I know what the splits are. I know the splits aren't great for him. And so the decision to go to a lefty at the top to face a couple of those lefties, I just felt like you had a guy who was just coming off of, again, you could make a case from a stuff perspective, the best start of his career, and then to put him out of a situation that he is most comfortable in, a starter, and have him come in, not even, by the way, in a clean inning, but coming in the first inning, after Victor Gonzalez pitched to 3 batters. I'm curious. I'm not saying everything would have been dramatically different had Grove started. I just, in hindsight, playing the what if game backwards, I kind of just wish they would have let him start the game. What do you think about that?
Well, me and my old man views, I'm not fond of openers in general, and I'm especially not big on them when basically Victor Gonzalez was only there to face 3 batters. If the inning kind of got away and then you pull him out and he can't get out of it, fine. But if you're going to use an opener, in my estimation, the opener, whoever it is, should be able to get you 1 inning, whether that takes 3 batters, 4 batters, 5 batters. Now, once you get over 5, then obviously you need to reevaluate because things are possibly going wrong.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm well aware of, like Michael Grove splits against left-handers, but again, it kind of ties back to, the discussions we've had, both just amongst our staff and on these shows of, hey, like at some point you have to let like a left-handed outfielder face left-handed pitching, right? You can't always just protect, in my opinion, you can't always protect them. Like you need everyday starters. You need Michael Grove. Your Dave Roberts had just come out and said like him and Bobby Miller were going to be counting on to make regular starts. And so I agree. Like, if he had struggled against the Yankees, then okay, but let him face, I think, top of the Phillies lineup and see how it goes. It's the Dodgers, I think, I don't think this is necessarily criticism or breaking any news, but they're not a team that takes, contrary to their general approach and belief, they don't put 100% into every decision, every game. I don't think, right? Like we've seen scenarios where, hey, I mean, Dave Roberts said it himself earlier this year. I think, he went to Phil Bickford in like a 1-0 game or 2-1 game. And he said, I just didn't see our offense scoring another run. So I put in big. So it was sorry. That's a long-winded way of saying I do agree with you. I would have let Grove just make his start. And then you kind of try to piece it together after that.
Yeah, and look, we could debate what the definition of this is, but I would just put a guy like Michael Grove, give him the best opportunity to succeed. And you could make a case facing lefties in the first is not that. And so that's what they decided. I would just argue that letting a starting pitcher start feels like the best opportunity to succeed, especially off of the outing he had previously. Okay, let's shift from starting rotation to the bullpen. And I kind of asked you this question earlier. Is this bullpen a fixable mess? Heading into Sunday, these numbers will all get worse, but heading into Sunday, they had the fourth worst bullpen ERA in the league, 4.68. That's nearly 2 runs worse than last year when they were the second best bullpen in all of baseball. If you want to play maybe this is bad luck game, they have a 307 batting average on balls in play against them. That's the 8th worst mark in baseball. Their home run per fly ball is the 5th worst in baseball. So basically, every time a ball gets hit in play, it is more likely to go for a hit against the Dodgers than, 23 other baseball teams. If a ball gets hit in the air, it goes out of the park, more against the Dodgers than it does against 25 or 26 other baseball teams. Now, you could easily make a case, hey, if your bullpen sucks and they're giving up loud contact and that's why that is, or is it just bad luck? To be determined there. But let me just walk through the week that the Dodgers had. On Tuesday, Almonte and Gratterall each give up a run. Caleb Ferguson ends up giving 3 earned runs, with Shelby Miller giving up the game-winning hit. He gets no earned runs because it was a walk-off. Wednesday, Syndergaard was terrible. The bullpen was mostly good until Evan Phillips, the guy that Scott and I got on here on the live show on Tuesday night, said, hey, they should have let Evan Phillips just stay for a second inning and pitch the 9th. Well, he responded to the two of us expressing confidence in him by giving up 2 hits, 2 runs, another walk-off loss, 2 in 2 days. Thursday, you got the Kershaw and Taylor Scott game that we were all expecting. 9 great innings from those two. Friday, Michael Grove struggles. Vesia, Shelby Miller, good. Caleb Ferguson, once again, bad. Another walk-off loss for him. Saturday, kind of like a mirror image of Thursday. So Thursday, it was Kershaw and Taylor Scott. Saturday, it was Bobby Miller and Andre Jackson that give you 9 scoreless innings. And then today, we got the bullpen game, which I don't know, did exactly what we expected the bullpen game to be. And so let me ask you, because we've already talked about, is this a fixable mess? Is the Dodgers bullpen as bad as what we've seen? I mean, are they the 4th worst bullpen in Major League Baseball this season in your estimation, Matt? Or do you think there's some regression towards the mean in a positive way that's got to be coming for the Yency Almontes and those types of guys coming?
Yeah, I think there will be some improvement. I mean, they don't go from being one of the best bullpens over the past couple of years to being, 4th worst type level bad. And I think, what's interesting is a lot of like the ERA stuff and some of the different statistics that are thrown out. Like, I think we're going to have to sort of reevaluate and see, and it's too early to tell now, like the impact of the rule changes, right? Like the pitch clock, I think indirectly has affected pitching performances. And like, I don't know if you'll ever be able to draw like a direct correlation, but I think ERAs being up is one of them. And then obviously the limits on defensive shifts. The Dodgers were one of the most aggressive teams in using shifts, one of the most successful teams in using them. And now they're limited in that. And so I think that is also a factor in, the balls in play. They're going through holes that weren't typically there in years past. But yeah, I don't imagine the bullpen is this bad because, Evan Phillips, Caleb Ferguson, Alex Vesia, Yency Almonte, I think they're still very good, capable relief pitchers that have just sort of basically struggled at the same time. Like, I mean, the Dodgers really haven't had a stretch where I think the majority of their bullpen is really, kind of firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth pointing out to what you're saying. Last year, the Dodgers had the best ERA from a starting pitching perspective, 2.75. They're the 15th best mark in 2023. So that their ERA there has also gone up about a run and a half. That said, they're 15th in baseball and not 28th in baseball as their bullpen currently is. And so it's just a weird kind of a group because I look at some of those names and do I think Evan Phillips is going to be fine? Yes. Do I think Caleb Ferguson is going to be fine? Yes. And then even drop down a level. Is Gratterall for what he is, a seventh inning guy? Is he good there? Yes. Do I think Yency Almonte is going to figure some stuff out? Yes. Like, do I think even Alex Vesia, would I be shocked if he was a productive member of this bullpen 2 months from now? I wouldn't be shocked. And so you just go down the list of some of the names out there. And I know right now they've got a bunch of random. Kolarek pitched today. Nick Robertson, who I had some positive notes on, but was terrible today. Like, I think once they get this group to where it's supposed to be, as far as the group of guys that are actually out there, I think they're going to be fine. Now, when I say, is it a fixable mess? Do I think they're going to be a top 3 bullpen, which was one of my bold predictions early in the season? I think that ship has sailed. Like, I think we're not going to be there, barring some huge trades, which we know they aren't going to make in the bullpen if we're basing this off Andrew Friedman's track record. And so we'll see how that plays out. We did mention, by the way, Daniel Hudson. He's made 2 relief appearances. Dave Roberts says they're optimistic that he could rejoin the team in the next couple of weeks. The dash of salt that belongs with every Dave Roberts pitching prediction here. Hudson, for all we knew, was going to be ready by opening day, and then he wasn't. And now here we are in June, and we haven't seen him. So he has made 2 rehab appearances. They have been at the Arizona Complex League. Jimmy Nelson made a appearance right after Daniel Hudson, his first since April 25th. I mean, any degree of confidence that either of these guys is available? I mean, Hudson seems to be further ahead of Jimmy Nelson. I mean, we're sitting here on June 11th. By the end of June, do you think Daniel Hudson is pitched for the Dodgers?
No, I think it'll get to the point where it just makes sense to hold him until after the All-Star break. Probably wouldn't, if he's, 2 weeks at best, then why sort of rush it?
Yeah.
I think the biggest obstacle with Hudson is going to be, is he able to make the back-to-back appearances? Because that's, the knee recovery and how it's holding up to kind of repeated pitching off the mound is what the issue has been for him. And with Jimmy Nelson, unfortunately, like with his injury history, like it's just hard to have much faith in him coming back. And it's unfortunate because when he was healthy, I think in 2021, it was like he was very good. Like he was looking like another, patented Dodgers minor league signing, and the pitching coaches, work their magic, and he was a quality relief pitcher for them. And so, if he is able to come back, that would be a significant boon as well. But of the two, I'm more confident in Hudson. And even that being said, it's with the caveat of I still wouldn't necessarily expect it until after the All-Star break.
Yeah, I see people in the comments mentioning Ken Giles as well. He has been throwing to pitchers out at Camelback Ranch. This is from Bill Plunkett. Expected to be assigned to AAA Oklahoma City at some point. So, again, it's worth noting. There's a reason this guy was a free agent, and there's a reason he's needed time before being assigned. So I wouldn't get your hopes up there on Ken Giles, but we'll see. We'll see. I still just, the Dodgers figure the bullpen out. Like, the irony is, like somebody in the comments was saying we're being too naive, or I'm being too naive. The irony is I'm basing everything I'm saying off of an extended, lengthy track record of the Dodgers figuring the bullpen out with guys that we weren't expecting, and guys who, by any stretch this year has been the outlier. So it almost feels like naive would be the description of somebody that assumes that the 1 year outlier is what you should continue to bet on. I'm not saying anybody's naive. I just think it's funny to think, the Dodgers will figure it out is naive, when, Matt, we have a 10-year track record of them figuring it out.
Yeah, I agree. I think to the issue, it's, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because on one hand, like, the starting pitchers haven't done them much service either. So, a struggling bullpen is going to look that much worse when they're having to cover more innings than maybe they should have to begin with. And so, I would say, as much as the Dodgers do have a track record of their bullpen being well, like, their starting pitching historically has also been a little bit better than what the current state is right now.
Yeah.
And think those things do go hand in hand in some sense. So, collectively, like there'll have to be more improvement from the starters of pitching deep in the game so that the bullpen maybe isn't needing to cover, 4 to 5 innings each and every game.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And we thought, we kind of got that with Kershaw when he went 7. You were like, okay, thank goodness. And Bobby Miller. I mean, basically, the fact that essentially the bullpen didn't get used for 2 games, you would think they would be okay. But when you have a bullpen game mixed in there, I mean, that's exactly what you think it is. It's basically a 1-inning outing from a starting pitcher. Thankfully, there is an off day on Monday. All right, 2 more topics here before we get to questions. Let's talk about the Arizona Diamondbacks and ask the question of how seriously are you taking the Arizona Diamondbacks, Matt? A 3.5 game lead on the division. They have the second best record in the National League, just behind the Braves. I've got some thoughts, but I'll let you share first. Buying or selling the Diamondbacks as NL West future champions?
Well, I'm not ready to predict that they're going to win the NL West, but I've hinted at it at some of our shows over, maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And I am ready to declare that they are the 2023 version of the 2021 Giants.
Yeah.
And I remember when you and I, a couple of years ago, were doing our shows and we were kind of watching the Giants. We were thinking, they'll fall off, they'll cool off, and it just never happened. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm just going to expect the Diamondbacks to continue playing, like their hair is on fire. And if they regress a little bit, then great. And then the Dodgers, should be there to take the division again.
Yeah, I will. The one difference between the Giants and the Diamondbacks is, as some people have pointed out, the Diamondbacks have had some hype building. They've got some of the top prospects in Major League Baseball. And so it feels like they're early. The Giants was clearly a mirage because all their old guys had career years and then they went back to being bad guys again. I'll say this. So the Diamondbacks have won 11 of their last 13. I believe they've now won 5 in a row. I have said since the beginning that I had the Diamondbacks ahead of the Giants. I obviously didn't have the Diamondbacks ahead of the Dodgers, nor did I have them ahead of the Padres. But it is worth pointing out, Matt, if we want to be slightly optimistic about the Dodgers, that when you look at who the Diamondbacks have been beating up on, in that 11 out of their last 13, in that stretch, the 2 losses came against the Braves. So they went 1-2 against the Braves. The 11 wins came against the Rockies, the Nationals, and the Tigers. Okay, the Rockies are in last place in the National League West. They're 26-40. The Nationals are in last place, and they're 25-38. The Tigers are not in last place, but they're 26-37. So 26, 25, and 26. Those are the number of wins by the 3 teams that the Diamondbacks swept to get to that 10-win mark, while also going 1-2 against the Braves. You go further back than that. They've beaten the Giants recently, not good. The A's, who have won some games now, but a couple weeks ago were the worst team in baseball. The Pirates, who are not good. Then the Phillies as well, who we can't really talk smack about the Phillies because they just beat the Dodgers. They also lost the series to Boston. So basically, when you look at their last 8 series, I would say the 2 best teams they played were the Braves and the Red Sox. They lost both of those series. The rest of them they won, and won convincingly. And there's something too, like, let me be clear. I'm not crapping all over the Diamondbacks. Sweeping a team is difficult no matter how bad they are. So 11-2 is always good. I'm just saying it's worth pointing out, Matt, that the teams they have been doing this against, again, the 11-2 stretch were against the Rockies, the Nationals, and the Tigers, aside from a 1-2 against the Braves.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But, right now you can only play the schedule you're dealt, right? Exactly. And so it will end up you balancing out. And that's the point of, MLB's balanced schedule that everybody now plays. Really quick before I get sidetracked, I think Laura might have asked what the Dodgers record is against the Diamondbacks. It's 3-4. Okay. So far. They haven't played since basically the first week of April. They had the 2 series kind of basically back to back. The opening series, and the Dodgers played the Rockies, and then they went to Arizona. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to watch. And, when I drew the parallel between them and the Giants, it was more of kind of an unexpected rise. Yep. And yes, like you highlighted, in terms of roster construction, they are absolutely different. But, like I said, I'm still, even with hearing, who they've been beating up on, I'm still going to just expect that the Diamondbacks are going to be there because I made the mistake in 2021 with the Giants. And so I'd rather be pleasantly surprised than have to, watch the Dodgers end up going to a fight to the bitter end.
Yeah. And I mean, again, we're 65 games, in the Dodgers case, 66 games into the season. There is 100 games left to go. And so these things tend to even themselves out. And look, if the Diamondbacks can stay ahead of the Dodgers, I would expect that the Dodgers will continue to be very good. Even with the really bad stretch the Dodgers are in the midst of, they're still on pace to win 91 games. So if the Diamondbacks go out and can win 95 games, then you tip your cap and you say, hey, you know what? Kudos to you. But do I think that the Diamondbacks are going to be able to maintain, a 61% win percentage that they're currently on? I don't. I think at some point it's going to come back down to earth. I think Corbin Carroll's legit. I think Corbin Carroll, like if he hits, has a 950 OPS or whatever he's at for the rest of the season, for sure. Zach Allen is very good. I'm just saying, I think if you give me another 100 games to say, can the Dodgers make up 3.5 against the Diamondbacks? I would bet it. I mean, the Dodgers are probably still massive favorites. I believe they are. I had a friend text me. I can see if I could find the odds. But when we were looking at odds yesterday for the Diamondbacks to win the National League West, I mean, I still think they were maybe 200 or plus 200 or plus 300 or something like that. I mean, it was kind of a crazy, it was just, it was a number that surprised me. I'll put it that way. And so I guess I just still think that the Dodgers to win the National League West feels like the right move. But I mean, I'm assuming you would still bet on the Dodgers to win the National League West, excuse me.
Yeah, I still consider them the favorite. And like I said, I just expect the Diamondbacks to be, a player and be part of the picture maybe longer than anybody obviously most people were probably expecting. I think, what is there, I'll, kind of flip it back to you really quick. Is there like a 80 game threshold, 90 games, 100? Like, is there a point where, like, if the Diamondbacks are still playing really well at 85 games, call it, like, I don't want to say, will you be sold at that point, but will you be more convinced, or are you just going to, is it going to be like kind of constant doubt?
No, I think I'm already at a place where I'm taking them seriously for sure.
Okay.
I'm absolutely not like, oh, this is all fake. It's all going to come back down to earth. I just think right now, like the Diamondbacks are at like the 95th percentile for outcomes for them. And I think the Dodgers are probably at like the 60th percentile. And so I think like the Dodgers will regress positively. The Diamondbacks will regress negatively. I think the Dodgers finish with like the second best record in the National League. If you told me Arizona finishes with the third best, I'd buy it. I just think over the course of 162 games, things will even out in favor of the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers have had some injury luck that is more negative for them probably than what Arizona has experienced. I say that knowing that I don't know the intricacies of the Diamondbacks' health in the same way that I know the Dodgers. But I just tend to believe that like Julio is going to be better than we've seen him. The Dodgers bullpen is going to be better than it has seemed. And some of these young guys on Arizona are eventually going to regress, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, it does. And I guess we can end the Diamondbacks conversation at this. An unnamed staff member had told me that the Diamondbacks are a Joey Gallo trade away from winning the NL West. We'll let everybody in the comments guess who that may have been.
Yeah, geez Louise. All right, let's get to one last bit of news before we get to some questions here. There will be people in the chat, and I mean, I think all of us as Dodger fans will be excited, is that a couple of huge pitching prospects did get promoted by the Dodgers, and they are one step closer to making their major league debuts. That would be Landon Knack and Emmett Sheehan. These guys, if you haven't been following the Dodgers AA team, they've been crushing it from a pitching perspective. Unbelievable performances. These two guys in particular, so both of them just this past week have been promoted to AAA, will make their debuts there at some point in the next week. Background on these guys: Landon Knack, a second rounder in 2020. His 12 starts at AA, 57 innings, 2.2 ERA, more than a strikeout per inning, and just 12 walks. He's an elite command guy. The stuff is good. I mean, he's throwing 95-mile-an-hour fastball. But what Knack does is he doesn't walk anybody. He throws strikes, he throws multiple pitches, and the stuff is good enough. Throw it all in a blender, and you get a guy who has figured some stuff out this season. Emmett Sheehan, drafted a year after Knack in 2021 in the 6th round. How about this? In 24 2/3 innings in the month of May, he struck out 41 batters. I want you to think about that. 24 2/3. That's in the 1 month as a starter. So figure about 4 starts, 41 strikeouts. Josh Thomas, who covers the Dodgers, does some prospect stuff. He says it's the best fastball of any pitcher in the Dodgers farm system. Tops out at 99 with good vertical movement. So both of these guys in AAA, I would expect one, if not both of these guys to make their debut at some point. Knack is believed to be the favorite to get up quickly, depending on how they perform at AAA. He's Rule 5 eligible next year, so he'll need to get added to the 40-man in the offseason if they want to protect him. Assuming they do, it would make sense to add him to the 40-man first. But Knack and Sheehan, I would expect if these guys can give you a couple starts at AAA, get used to the level, and then see what happens. I mean, I wouldn't have been shocked if they called one of these guys up prior to today, but I think they're telling you a little bit about where they think they're at, that they chose a bullpen game over using one of these two pitchers. But it's a combination of the Dodgers are getting to a place where they're desperate enough to maybe turn to a young pitcher more quickly than they would want to normally. But also, I think they've just got as good of a pitching stable down in the minor leagues as they've had in a long time. And so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think some of this is being driven by circumstance, and the injuries are piling up. And I know as of now, the plan, the hope, the expectation is Dustin May returns at some point this year. I'm not very confident in that. And so, the Dodgers could find themselves in a situation where they need more starters, depending on what happens with Noah Syndergaard, depending on what happens with whatever they decide how they use Gavin Stone. I'm also looking at Knack and Sheehan as possible. Does one of them maybe end up in the bullpen for the postseason? Like I know your bold prediction was that would be, I think was it that Bobby Miller would be in the bullpen, or that he would make a postseason start?
I said last year he was going to make a postseason start. So we were just 12 months early on that one.
Yeah. So, with Bobby Miller, being moved up from potential bullpen ace in October to needing to start, like maybe one of these younger prospects then is placed into the bullpen if that still is, kind of struggling to really get on track.
Yeah, and both of them just on the surface could profile as relief pitchers because you've got Knack, a guy who's going to throw strikes and not walk anybody, which is the cardinal sin in the bullpen. And then on Sheehan on the other side, he's kind of got, like, if you could throw 99 as a starter, throw him out there and say, hey, just ramp it up for an inning and see what happens. I mean, you could easily see him throwing 99 to 100 with some secondary stuff. So for a Dodgers bullpen who desperately needs help, Matt, I think that's a great point there. Real quick on the Diamondbacks thing, looking up to win the NL West right now, the Diamondbacks are plus 370. So almost 4-1 odds on the Diamondbacks. So again, Vegas is always right, as they say. Worth pointing out, to win the National League, the Dodgers are currently plus 270. If you believe this, the Padres have a better odds to win the National League than the Diamondbacks. Padres are plus 850. The Diamondbacks 12-1 to win the National League. And then, of course, if you want to go World Series odds, Dodgers third best odds behind the Braves and the Rays. The Diamondbacks are, what are they, 13th? 30-1. 30-1. So again, if you want to place a bet, I'd tell you Bobby Miller's chances of winning the Rookie of the Year are far better than the Diamondbacks winning the World Series. But that puts the 30-1 odds in some context there for everybody. All right, let's get to some questions. As always, we'd appreciate if you want to just put question, all caps, in there. We'll get to those. Just a couple quick hitters as people are starting to populate those. Noah Syndergaard placed on the injured list mercifully this past week by the Dodgers. Do you think he pitches again for the Dodgers, Matt?
No, I don't think he will.
Wow.
I think he's going to spend probably 3 weeks to a month on the IL, and I think the Dodgers are hoping that their starting rotation will be in better shape by that point, and then maybe they just make some sort of decision with Syndergaard.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, the fact that they went injured list makes me think he's going to make one more appearance. But if you told me he makes a rehab appearance, gets shelled at AAA, and then gets DFA'd, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. But this feels like the right decision for where they are right now. So I'll leave it there. Okay, let's get to some questions. Dong's asking me this tough one. How about those Oregon Ducks? If I visit family in Portland, what would be your top food recommendations? Well, unfortunately, the Oregon Ducks, after an incredible Friday night performance in which they were losing 8-0 in the third inning, and then they came back and won 9-8, much like my Dodgers, they blew a 1-run lead in the ninth. They were 2 outs away from advancing to the College World Series. They load the bases, give up a 2-run single walk-off. So now they have to play today. They are currently losing 5-3. They were up 3-1. They are now trailing 5-3 in the top of the sixth. So I'm not quite positive. How about those Oregon Ducks? Matt, I'm just curious. Do you watch college baseball at all? I don't. I admittedly am not a fan. I turned it on because the Ducks are in the Super Regionals. But are you a college baseball guy?
Not too much. I mean, once it gets to is it the regionals that are in Omaha?
The College World Series. So the final 8 play in Omaha. So
Okay,
it's
so once
regionals,
it
4 teams, and then it cuts down to super regionals where it's a
got it.
three game series between 2 teams, and then the 8 winners of super regionals advance to the College World Series.
Once it gets down to 8, if I'm home and there's nothing on and I turn on, ESPN and the game's on, like I'll leave it, but I don't necessarily go out of my way looking for it.
College baseball, I'll just say this, a tough watch. It's a tough watch. I mean, it's not great. The quality of play is not great. Games take forever. I think they do have a pitch clock. But man, it's not my favorite product in the world. We'll put that. As far as some food recommendations for Portland, I'll probably think of other ones. So send me a DM if you actually do make that trip. But there's a lot. PDX Sliders is a great one. JoJo's is a fried chicken place that does JoJo's, obviously, and they're the best JoJo's I've ever had. Chicken and Guns is a food cart in Southeast. Those are a few of my favorite spots personally. I'm kind of in the suburbs, so if you end up in the suburbs, let me know. Okay. Michael asks, if we fail in the playoffs again this year, who on the staff gets fired? Is it the hitting coaches, the pitching staff, Roberts, hopefully? Not a popular opinion here, Matt. I mean, it depends how it looks, right? If the Dodgers win the National League West, I don't think anybody gets fired. I mean, the people are talking about the hitting coaches getting fired. We lead the league in runs. Like, he fixed JD Martinez. He fixed David Peralta. All these people that everyone said was terrible. Everybody's hitting. I shouldn't say everybody. They're obviously Austin Barnes, Miguel Rojas. There are guys not hitting, but it won't be the hitting coaches. I mean, the hitting coaches feel safe. Mark Pryor, he had one failed experiment with Noah Syndergaard. I don't know. I just don't think anybody gets fired unless they lose the division by 10 games and Dave Roberts quits, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that type of scenario, I could see some staff changes, but short of that, I'm not expecting something like that to happen. So, look, if their historic team last year that flamed out in the playoffs and just completely underwhelmed, if there weren't wholesale changes at that point, I don't really see any scenario short of, I guess, like you said, if the Dodgers somehow, finish 10 games out of the playoffs, then maybe, things went, but I would be inclined that something like that would be more injury driven, and they're not going to necessarily fault Dave Roberts for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see, staff changes happening.
Yeah. I mean, related question, Mark Pryor's starters and bullpen, who do you hold more accountable for the pitching failures? Is it Dave Roberts? Is it Mark Pryor? Or I guess, is it Andrew Friedman?
Yeah, I would arguably go a step higher than what, we're being asked and go to Andrew Friedman because, he's who is basically putting the roster together. Like Mark Pryor and Dave Roberts didn't sign Noah Syndergaard. I'm sure, especially Mark Pryor in the pitching department had input on, hey, we're thinking about signing him, scout him. Do you think you could tweak some things? And of course, they're going to, I think, be confident in what they can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like the blame game. Like I know it's popular and it's what social media enjoys doing, but a lot of times it's not just really one person. Like even Dave Roberts gets blamed for a lot of his decisions, but in at least 50% of those, like if a player just performs better, like we're not talking about it, right? And so to come to look at the Dodgers ERA now and say it's Mark Pryor's, all of his work, all of his coaching and training and all that, and so it's his fault. Like I don't necessarily buy that. And again, I think that the pitch clock and some of the rule changes are having more of an impact than maybe anybody would have sort of expected.
Yeah. Like when Evan Phillips blows a game, who are you blaming? Evan Phillips is incredible. He just had a bad day. I mean, we could sit here and talk about Caleb Ferguson, and we did on Tuesday night show. Did he get left in too long? Yada, yada, yada. I think the answer is yes. That would be a Dave Roberts thing more than a Mark Pryor thing. So, I mean, it's kind of like Mark Pryor fixed Yency Almonte last year, and now Almonte has struggled. And so, like, whose fault is that? Like, does Pryor get credit for fixing him and then for him regressing? Or, like, was he a bad player to begin with? I mean, I think it's a mix. I think, admittedly, I will say it's hard to tell who gets, like, what the pitching coach's actual impact is at times, because I think ultimately the manager bears the most responsibility because he's putting guys into situations, i.e. Michael Grove. Like, Michael Grove struggled. Is that because he got put into a situation that wasn't set up for success? That would be Dave Roberts' fault. Versus, hey, the stuff all ticked up, the velocity was higher, the spin rate was better. So is that a Mark Pryor success? So I don't know. I tend to be with you. Like, I would criticize the Noah Syndergaard move, and that's not a Dave Roberts or Mark Pryor ultimate decision. So I would go Friedman, then Roberts, then Pryor. That's how I would rank it. You agree?
Yeah, that's fair. Especially for this season specifically.
TQT. Gavin Stone was far from impressive in the majors. Minor league stats mediocre as well. Should we include him as part of a deal before his stock plummets even more? I would go the opposite way. I mean, everybody loved Gavin Stone heading into the season. He was actually very good at AAA. He had one bad start to begin the year. Then he was on an incredible run before getting called up. I think struggling in the majors really messed with him, clearly, because he was bad, got sent back down, got brought back up, was bad again, got sent back down, has been bad again. I would say his stock is too low. Like, I wouldn't trade him now because I think everybody loved him. And I would just say, take a deep breath, give the guy some time to reset. Maybe it's not in 2023. Maybe it's 2024. By all accounts, this guy's going to be a stud. So I wouldn't sell when his stock is lowest. I would take my chances he bounces back.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that they'd be able to necessarily get too much from him, even if he's packaged in some sort of trade right now, just because of his struggles. And also, oh man, I lost my train of thought. But basically, yeah, it was pretty much what you said. It's early in his career, and there's still time to turn it around, and it's tough for these guys, right? And what I was going to say, the Dodgers may not be in a position to really cut into their pitching depth, and at least he's been up at the major league level. He kind of has some feel for it.
Yeah. Okay, Michael asked, this is for Jeff. Jeff, did you put the whammy on Austin Barnes? He is sort of hurt. X-rays negative. Didn't play at all. Could potentially has not on the injured list. But I'm gonna hand the mic over to Matt. We had a rule. We're not allowed to talk about Austin Barnes until his batting average starts with the 1 or his OPS starts with the 3. I don't think his batting average is above 100 yet, but I believe the OPS is at like 305. So Matt, you've been silenced for a couple months here. The floor is yours. Austin Barnes, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just unfortunate that he got hit by that pitch. He was obviously about to go on a tear. He had made some good contact in that game. I think he had, 1 or 2 hits. One of them, I think, was a double.
He had a double. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think it was just one hit. It was one hit, and it was a double. He was 1 for 4. He did get, and plus the hit by pitch.
He might have been robbed. But yeah, it worked out for you because Will Smith started, 3 games in a row, even though the third one was an earlier afternoon game. And so, but we'll see. But in all seriousness, I expect Barnes to avoid the IL, but you never know.
Yeah, I will say trending up, 093 batting average in the month of April, a 100 batting average in the month of May, and then in 5 at-bats in the month of June, now hitting 200. So I apologize to him. The season average is up to 103, and the OPS has skyrocketed to 321. So unfortunately, I think Austin Barnes is now fair game, at least for a few more weeks until those numbers dip back down. It's pretty crazy because like Miguel Rojas, I'm like, man, this guy's so bad. And I look and his OPS is 500. I'm like, 300 is so bad. That's where Austin Barnes is, though. This is a good question. BMR wants to know, do you still see the Padres as a threat to win the division? I was just looking up the standings. Dodgers are 3.5 games back of Arizona. The Padres are actually in 4th place. The Giants are 3.5 back of the Dodgers. The Padres are 2 games back of the Giants. So 9 games back in the division, 5.5 back of the Dodgers. Do you still see the Padres as a threat to win the division?
I mean, very little. I guess the only threat that they sort of pose in my viewpoint now is just that they do have a bunch of talent, and at some point you think maybe like they'll get it together, but I don't know. It could be, it could be a matter of they just might have fallen too far behind to make up that much ground.
Yeah. I never want to count them out because I just said, hey, the Dodgers 3.5 games in the division, no big deal. I mean, the Padres clearly have the talent to wipe away a 5.5 game deficit to the Dodgers if the Dodgers can make a run. But it's just, it feels like, again, the sample size is getting bigger and bigger. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. I don't know if they ended up winning their game today. I know they were playing the Giants and that game was like in extra innings and then delayed.
Yeah, I didn't see it. Sorry. So I can't.
Yeah, no. You're good. I was just, anyways, I'm looking at something and I think I'm looking in the wrong place because it doesn't appear to be. Oh, no. Yeah. Never mind. The Rockies were playing. So the Giants beat the Cubs today. So I'm thinking, oh, yeah, never mind. I'm all over the place. The Padres were playing the Rockies. The Rockies ended up winning 5-4. There we go. So, yeah. I still consider them to be a threat, but I would say that a lot would have to go wrong for them to get themselves back in the mix. Lewis asks, would the bullpen be better served with the reliever being more of a swingman who can pitch multiple innings? I mean, that's kind of what they've been doing. You saw Taylor Scott go 2 innings. You saw Andre Jackson go 3 innings. So clearly they used Andre Jackson last night. They could have saved him to be the starter today, Matt. Instead, they said, hey, let's just save the whole bullpen and let him mop up duty. 3 innings save for our guy, Andre Jackson, before he was immediately demoted back down to AAA. But I don't know. Like part of it is, other than Andre Jackson, there's not really a guy who fits this role unless it's Michael Grove. But right now he's their number 4 starter.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make, is they don't really have somebody who profiles that way. I mean, maybe on occasion Shelby Miller could get you 5 to 6 outs, but I mean, even he's been an okay middle relief pitcher outside of, some of his bumps in the road. But yeah, I just don't think they have that option right now.
Okay. Ducks did just hit a home run, I'm being told by the chat. So we're down 5-4. We're making our comeback. Let's get to one more question, maybe 2. TQT, I love Friedman, but the equity he has built is slowly fading. The moves or lack thereof are alarming. Are you 100% still on board with in Friedman we trust? I would say yes. It needs to be more than, we're literally, Matt, not even 8 months removed from one of the greatest teams of all time, regular season in Major League Baseball. You know how I feel about the playoffs and whether it's a true representation of how good a team is. We're less than a year removed from one of the best teams of all time from a regular season, large sample size perspective. So I know the offseason was bad. The Syndergaard move was bad. The Miguel Rojas move was bad. I think the JD Martinez move was good. I think the David Peralta move at this point was good. The Jason Hayward move at this point seems to have been good. Could there have been more moves made? Yes, but I still think the good far outweighs the bad, even what seems to have been one of the worst off seasons he's had for the Dodgers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not necessarily at 100%, but I'm still 90-ish, 95. I think where my sort of criticism would come is just looking at, the Dodgers have a good track record of drafting and developing talent, but then they pretty much have all left. And so that's and not all of that falls on Friedman's plate, although more recently it does. And so that, to me, like 3, 4, 5 years from now, that will be kind of the interesting sort of reflection point to look back and see where all that talent went that the Dodgers drafted, especially if Julio Urías ends. And I know that he wasn't necessarily drafted, but obviously an international free agent signing at a young age, yada yada. But yeah, Buehler, and it could be interesting because Buehler's not 100% healthy anymore, right? Like his trajectory sort of changed. But if he was going to be somebody who continued on his path and then walked, like I think we could have an interesting discussion about Friedman at that point.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, that'll do it for us tonight. We will be back next Sunday for the next 3 weeks. Little programming note here. We're going to shoot for 7:10 p.m. We're all familiar with first pitch at 7:10 p.m. So Sunday nights at 7:10 p.m. for the next 3 weeks. And then as we get into the summer and some of our personal schedules adjust and adapt, we'll become more consistent. But we're going to shoot for 7 p.m. on Sunday nights the next 3. We also have a live watch along this Tuesday against the White Sox. So Scotty and I will be on playback. Playback.tv/DodgerBlue1958 is where you can find us there as well. So we appreciate you joining us. Again, thank you to YouTube folks. Thank you to podcast folks. We are part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Check out DodgerBlue.com for the latest Dodger Blue 1958 on social media as well. Enjoy the rest of your night. And as always, go Dodgers.